So I would foremost to start off with the question that capitalism in its original format is maybe the least bad of all systems out there. I think that's something that we might have to acknowledge again, but we can always wait to be surprised. But if we define that outcome, we acknowledge that the fact. But when I say in its authentic or original format, it has been there have been some bending of the rules, and there have been some what I would call also the usurpation of the system, the capitalist system, by what I would call quote unquote evil genius, right? So, and in that regard, so if we look at it, so the bending of the rules, of what did that consist, right? So in many, many ways. So we could start off with, we allowed or we made, as of 1982, we made share buybacks legal again. So prior to 1982, it was illegal to undertake share buybacks because it was considered market manipulation. Nowadays, there's a major constituent of the way our capitalist quote unquote system works is by the share buybacks, right? So that's a system, and we make full ignorance on the impact it has on share prices, and of course by extension on the managerial compensation of the C-suites which are undertaking those share buybacks. We also, if we look at the way we actually have actually dismantled Glass-Steagall in this is the 1933 Act, again as an outcome of the largest financial crisis in history. So in 1999. We had this Glass-Steagall Act dismantled under the democratic regime of Clinton. And so what it allowed for is the merging and the fusing of risky investment banking operations along with what I would call traditional non-risky commercial banking. And that fusing has left to a very complex financial system, also in the aggregation of the importance of the financial industry, enormous amount of concentration of power. But more importantly, we have in that process also introduced moral hazard, right? So the moral hazard notion is the fact that the C-suite is now taking financial risks in a very, dense kind of power concentration, and knowing that the central bank has their back. Right, so this is the notion of that moral hazard that the central bank will actually intervene in case if things go wrong. We also have the elements, as already before said before. This is not understandable as we as an evolving human species that we have not taken much more care of our commons. Right, we've said before, the commons access to clean air, clean soil, and clean water. We have actually in our economic setup, we have that completely disregarded. We didn't price for it, we didn't regulate for it, and it was all to the benefit of our short-term profits. Talking about short-term profits, we also have at the same time, we are embracing short-termism, right? Whether it is the quarterly reporting cycle or whether it's high-frequency trading. Again, to the detriment of more intergenerational thinking. So if we think our ancestral forefathers, were always looking when they took a decision, what is the impact on 4 to 5 generations down the line? We are taking decisions, at best with a 3-month time horizon, right? So because we know we have this quarterly reporting cycle, which is taken as a benchmark. We also have this conflict of interest, which is rampant. We, as I said, there is the conflict of interest where we see, for example, FDA and Big Pharma. So we have members of Big Pharma actually taking seats in the FDA, and after a while they go back, after their term, they go back to Big Pharma. So there is no actually very explicit separation of responsibility, but also of representation in those structures, ensuring that, public health is, coming to the forefront and to the benefit of our the private citizen. I would come back maybe as a last element also as a democratically, as part of the democracy, because it's also very important that you do have an economic system which is embedded in a very robust democratically institutions. is the reference made earlier to Citizen United, whereby again you have the big donors, big corporations, and wealthy individuals who could outfund, who could outpace, the private, citizen. And again, that will, translate itself to the fact that his voice, or the voice of the private citizen, will hardly be heard, will be represented in this overall decision process. So coming back then, so if we know what all these flaws are, we do acknowledge that maybe the capitalist system is the least bad of all the other systems. And yet, by this, what I would call very short description or enumeration of flaws, we should be able to address those the flaws to improve the outcomes. And one could imagine as such a economic system then which is dealing with the allocation of these scarce resources in such a way that it leads to a sufficient production of goods and services to the benefit of the individual or the private citizen, but in a manner which is healing, caring, regenerative, for all the likes, for the employees, the community, the planet, and also the capital stakeholder in the full process. And that, fully embedded by, again, a robust democratic democratically established institutions and elected representatives.